Ray Suarez. On the NewsHour tonight, the news of this Tuesday, then the latest on the administration plan to shore up banks, the presidential candidates on bolstering a weak financial system, an interview with independent candidate Ralph Nader, and a big-picture campaign report from New Mexico. Tonight's focus, economic inequality in the land of enchantment.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer is provided by
With hard work and careful planning, Pacific Life can help you retire the way you want to. With mutual funds and life insurance, and with annuities that can guarantee an income for the rest of your life. Your financial professional at Pacific Life can help you reach your retirement goals. Pacific Life, the power to help you succeed.
With soaring energy prices and global climate change, there are good reasons for believing in wind. Wind energy is clean and plentiful, and it answers the call for sustainable ways to create the electricity we need. We know because our sole focus is developing technology that uses the energy of the wind to generate electricity. America has some of the world's most abundant wind resources, and Vestas is here to help harness them.
Grant Thornton, Chevron,
the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, working to solve social and environmental problems at home and around the world.
and with the ongoing support of these institutions and foundations. And
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
The U.S. government went into the banking business today. It was the most sweeping federal intervention since the Great Depression. Under the plan, the Treasury will buy stakes in 9 major banks as a start. The goal is to inject $250 billion into those banks and others to ease the credit crunch. President Bush said the move should relieve pressure on retirement accounts, college savings, and other investments.
I recognize that the action leaders are taking here in Washington and in European capitals can seem distant from those concerns. But these efforts are designed to directly benefit the American people by stabilizing our overall financial system and helping our economy recover.
The program is part of the overall financial rescue plan. Another part calls for spending at least $100 billion buying up bad debts from banks. But a leading House Democrat, Barney Frank, said today that effort will take time to organize, and there's a need for action now.
Getting ready to buy the assets is a trickier business. So it's, but we ran into this dilemma because you said, hey, we're in a hurry, and then it's kind of hurry up and wait. Well, you pass this, and then you don't do anything for a month. This way, you got the conceptually easier, although obviously, difficult in general, part of it now. I think that's a very good staging.
Today's announcement followed similar moves by European nations yesterday, and there were signs those efforts have loosened credit markets just a bit. Key interest rates on short-term loans between banks were down a little for the second day. Wall Street rallied for a time today on the bank news, but stocks fell later as recession fears came to the fore. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 76 points to close just under 93.11. The Nasdaq was down 65 points to close at 1779. Overseas, European markets were up for a second day, and Japan's main index soared 14%. Governments around the world took further steps today to bolster their financial systems. Australia announced it will funnel more than $7 billion into its economy, and the President of the European Union, José Manuel Barroso, said the EU will act to protect savings accounts.
We will tomorrow adopt a proposal for a revised directive on deposit guarantees. It will consolidate action already taken at national level under the Commission's guidance into a common instrument. This will confirm to citizens that Europe is serious about protecting their savings while taking action to stabilize the financial system.
White House officials said today President Bush will meet with Barroso and French President Nicolas Sarkozy this weekend at Camp David. And elsewhere, Iceland held talks with Russia seeking a loan to stave off financial collapse. The U.S. budget deficit topped $450 billion this fiscal year just ending, a new record. It's more than double the previous year's number, and it could be far higher next year as the cost of rescuing the financial system gets counted. Republican presidential candidate John McCain unveiled his economic plan today, totaling $52 billion. It would halt taxes on unemployment benefits and guarantee all savings for 6 months. Democrat Barack Obama endorsed the new federal plan to buy stakes in U.S. banks, but he said taxpayers need the same protection as investors. We'll have more on both candidates' economic policies later in the program. This was Election Day in Canada after a 37-day campaign dominated by economic issues. Polls showed Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper would likely beat out the Liberal Party leader Stéphane Dion. The Conservatives hope to increase their count in Parliament, but they still could fall short of a majority. Negotiators in Zimbabwe worked today to salvage a unity government. It was in jeopardy after President Robert Mugabe demanded control of key government ministries. The stalemate threatened any attempts to fight growing starvation in the country. We have a report from Martin Geisler of Independent Television News.
Just 4 weeks ago, Zimbabwe's President Robert Mugabe signed a power-sharing deal with the opposition. A new beginning, he promised, a time for old wounds to heal. But he's going back on those words already. And after years in opposition, the country's new Prime Minister still doesn't have the power to help the people.
It's a graphic tale of a failed state. A state which is not able to respond even to the basic needs of its own people. This is almost like a state which is out of a war zone. When people don't have food, they have to scramble for food, not only in the rural areas where the majority live, but also in the urban areas.
It is beyond desperation. On a roadside in Zimbabwe's capital city, a man who had the pride to put on a suit in the morning lies in a skip, foraging for food. More rubbish arrives, he barely moves, then rakes through the waste for anything that could stave off the hunger. And no one around bats an eyelid. Just a month after its new dawn, Zimbabwe has sunk further than ever. What little food there is goes to a chosen few. We were told this grain was only being given to people who voted for Robert Mugabe. One man who dared to question the system was hauled away. Why don't you put it in the shops where everyone can buy it, he shouts. But just look at the shops now. This is a supermarket, open for business, but with nothing for sale. Even the $21 billion boot polish has gone.
Today's political talks produced no breakthrough. They resume tomorrow. In Afghanistan today, 3 NATO soldiers and 16 Afghans were killed in separate bombings. That word came as a top UN envoy said the number of militant attacks has reached a 6-year high. The Afghan defense minister acknowledged the fight is getting harder. He blamed an influx of foreign fighters.
A lot of terrorists, which were busy in other places, have all been diverted to Afghanistan. The success of the coalition forces in Iraq and also some other issues in some of the neighboring countries have made it possible that there is a major increase in the foreign fighters.
Also today, NATO troops in Afghanistan were ordered to pull back from fights instead of calling in airstrikes. Recent strikes have killed more than 100 Afghan civilians. And in Iraq, a U.S. soldier was shot and killed in Baghdad today. 7 Americans have died in Iraq so far this month. The state of Ohio today executed a double murderer who argued he was too fat for lethal injection. Richard Cooley said finding a vein would be difficult because he was 5'7", 267 pounds. The U.S. Supreme Court rejected his appeal yesterday. Today, the court also rebuffed Troy Davis, a death row inmate in Georgia, convicted of killing a policeman. Former President Carter and others support his bid for a new trial. Strong winds in Southern California stoked large wildfires again today. 2 fires burned in the San Fernando Valley outside Los Angeles, with another at Camp Pendleton, the U.S. Marine base near San Diego. In 3 days, the fires have destroyed dozens of homes and killed at least 2 people. More than 2,000 firefighters plus aircraft have been called in. But Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger said the state budget crisis will not interfere.
We spare not one single dollar when it comes to fighting fires. We're going to use all the money, even if we have to take it from somewhere else. We always will make public safety and protecting the people's lives and protecting the people's properties our #1 priority.
Thousands of people have had to leave their homes as the fires advance. The governor has declared a state of emergency in Los Angeles and Ventura counties. Congressman Tim Mahoney denied any wrongdoing today after allegations he paid a former aide to keep quiet about an affair. The Florida Democrat admitted causing his family embarrassment and heartache, but he said a House ethics investigation would find nothing illegal. Mahoney succeeded Republican Congressman Mark Foley. He resigned in 2006 in a scandal involving male congressional pages. There was mixed news today for those who took the painkiller Vioxx. A long-term study confirmed it doubles the risk of stroke and heart attack. But the medical journal Lancet also said the risk subsides a year after a patient stops taking the drug. Vioxx was pulled from the market in 2004. That's it for the news summary tonight. Now, stabilizing the banks, a campaign economic wrap, a Ralph Nader candidate interview, and a big picture from New Mexico. The government unveils its latest plan to shore up the banking industry. Jeffrey Brown begins with this report.
The plan to buy billions in banking stocks comes after a similar coordinated move was announced by European governments yesterday. Less than a month ago in a congressional hearing, Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson seemed to dismiss the notion of a government equity purchase program.
There were some that said, we should just go and stick capital in the banks. Put preferred stocks, stick capital in the banks. And that's what you do when you have failures. The right way to do this is not going around and using guarantees or injecting capital, and there's been various proposals to do that, but to use market mechanisms.
But that was then. By this morning, circumstances had changed, and Paulson and other top economic officials detailed a bank stock purchase plan.
Government owning a stake in any private U.S. company is objectionable to most Americans, me included. Yet the alternative of leaving businesses and consumers without access to financing is totally unacceptable. When financing isn't available, consumers and businesses shrink their spending, which leads to businesses cutting jobs and even closing up shop.
Though the plan is voluntary, Paulson reportedly made it clear in meetings yesterday with the heads of large banking institutions that their participation was virtually required. Today's government actions include the $250 billion plan to purchase stock in U.S. banks. The money comes out of the $700 billion rescue package passed 11 days ago by Congress. $125 billion goes to 9 banks. Citigroup, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and J.P. Morgan Chase will each receive $25 billion in return for preferred stock. 5 other institutions will split $25 billion. Another $100 billion will be available for smaller regional banks. The government would also guarantee new debt issued by banks for the next 3 years. In exchange, participating institutions promise to limit executive compensation and ban so-called golden parachutes for executives as long as the government holds the stock. The FDIC will also now provide unlimited insurance to all non-interest-bearing bank accounts in the U.S. until the end of next year, a move intended to help small business. The chair of the Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke, an expert on past financial calamities, said the extraordinary moves were suited to the time.
But we will not stand down until we have achieved our goals of repairing and reforming our financial system and thereby restoring prosperity to our economy. The actions today are aimed at restoring confidence in our institutions and markets and repairing their capacity to meet the credit needs of American households and businesses. The voluntary equity purchase program, described by the Secretary, will strengthen financial institutions' capacity and willingness to lend.
Sheila Bair is chair of the FDIC.
Our efforts also parallel those of the international community. Their guarantees for bank debt and increases in deposit insurance would put U.S. banks on an uneven playing field unless we acted as we are today.
After the plan was announced this morning, markets surged before falling into negative territory by day's end. And joining us to discuss today's moves are Robert Glauber of Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. He's former CEO of the National Association of Securities Dealers and served in the Treasury Department under the first President Bush. Dean Baker, co-director of the Center for Economic and Policy Research, a Washington think tank, and Richard Silla, an economic historian at New York University's Stern School of Business. Robert Glauber, a good move, a necessary move, how would you describe it?
I say it's a necessary move. I think the Treasury obviously was hesitant to do this, but became convinced for a number of reasons that there was time to take what really quite dramatic steps, not unprecedented steps, but really quite dramatic.
What pushed them? I mean, we saw what Paulson was saying not that long ago. What changed his mind?
I think two things. One is, I think they looked at numbers that convinced them that the banking system is undercapitalized and needs an injection of capital. And the other is what Sheila Bair said in your introduction, that Europe has done this now, and there's a competitive problem. If European banks are better protected than American banks, money could flow there and come out of here.
Dean Baker, how do you see today's move?
Well, I think it was the right thing to do. I think it was unfortunate that it took Secretary Paulson so long to go down this path. I mean, originally was proposing to buy up the troubled assets of the banks, and I think, Barney Frank made the comment that we don't really know how to do that. It's a difficult process. It's not clear what you do. That's a very indirect way of injecting capital into the banking system. The immediate need was to shore up their capital, and this does that. And again, the guarantees, I think, are very important for deposits, non-interest-bearing deposits, and for new debt from the banks. So I think it's definitely on the right track. I mean, there's some quibbles I would make with the program, but...
Like what?
Well, I would have, one, just, the interest rate we got. I note that when Warren Buffett invested in Goldman Sachs, he got 10%, we're getting 5%. I don't think there was a need for us to take a substantially below market interest rate. And two, again, getting back to the issue of executive compensation, I don't really think that this will be very binding on the banks.
All right, let me come back to those. First, I want to bring in Richard Silla, because I want to try to help people understand this. It's been referred to as a partial nationalization. Now, what exactly does that mean?
Well, in the countries where they totally nationalize banks, the government just comes in and takes them over, pays off all the stockholders, and then operates them almost like government agencies for a while. In this case, most of our banks will continue to have most of their capital from private sources, but they will receive an injection of capital at a time when extra capital is needed to help them get back and lending to people. So I think, maybe the government is taking a minority stakeholder position in these companies, nothing like a majority position.
And are there precedents that you look to that help us guide our way?
Well, we did the same thing back in the 1930s, and from 1933 to 1935, President Roosevelt authorized the Reconstruction Finance Corporation to inject capital in the form of preferred stock into banks. And something like 6,000 banks received injections of capital at that time in the form of preferred stock. And along with deposit insurance, this injection of capital, which I think was not too far different, in that economy from what this current program is, so the injections of capital and deposit insurance stabilized the banking system, and we helped us get out of the Great Depression.
So, Robert Glauber, if the U.S. is a kind of passive investor here, let's talk about some of the questions that Dean Baker just raised. For example, does the government get a good return on its investment? What kinds of questions are raised for you?
Well, I think a number of questions are raised, and they're difficult ones. First of all, the government is going to have to decide which banks it injects capital into. That means it's going to pick winners and losers. And whenever it does that, that's a very hard decision for government to make.
You're talking about all the other banks out there, because so far we're just talking about the biggest, right?
That's right. They've chosen the 9 biggest. That, I think, is an easy decision. But how about the other 7,000 banks? My bet is a number of them are going to queue up, and the government's going to have to decide how much money to put in each one of them. And that basically puts them in the position of choosing winners and losers. That's a tough decision for government to make. There are other difficult problems as well. It's said that this is passive, but one of the things the government has already done is say what it wants to have happen about compensation contracts, and it has outlawed certain compensation contracts. Beyond that, the government is going to have to decide eventually what it does with the warrants it gets. It gets some participation in the common stock. It's going to have warrants that are valuable and eventually going to have to sell those. So this isn't the end of the difficult decisions.
So, Dean Baker, I mean, we're talking about the government here, but we mean taxpayers in a sense. Are you suggesting that we don't have enough protections here or guarantees on return?
Well, I think so. I mean, as I say, I would like to have seen us get, I don't know if we get the same deal that Warren Buffett got, but if he can get 10%, why shouldn't we get something?
This is when Warren Buffett invested in Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, why shouldn't we get something at least comparable to that? And again, I say that for two reasons. One is, taxpayers should try to get as much by way of protection as they can. But the other point is, when Secretary Paulson first announced his idea, he said this should not be punitive. And my view is absolutely it should be punitive. I mean, you're talking about taking money from people who, work as school teachers, as firefighters. You're taking their tax dollars and using it to reward banks that got themselves into enormous trouble. And these are the absolute richest people in the country. So I could certainly understand. I think there's a need to tell people that, no, it's not going to be fun. This isn't a party. We're not handing out money to the banks. We're extracting tough conditions.
And the limits on executive pay and compensation, are they not enough?
I think they're very lax. I mean, the Undersecretary Kashkari met with Wall Street bankers earlier this week, or I think it was last week actually. There was a report on this in the Wall Street Journal. He said you shouldn't worry about that. It really won't be very tough. My guess is that virtually all the banks will find ways around it. I'll be very surprised if we hear of pay cuts for any executives at the banks as a result of this.
Richard Siller, you want to weigh in on all these kinds of questions, given what you've seen from the past and the role of government in the private sector?
Well, I would disagree some with Dean Baker in the sense that Warren Buffett is, the chairman of a company, Berkshire Hathaway. He's using that company's money to invest in Goldman Sachs and the General Electric. The government, and so he has to look after the interest of his stockholders. The government isn't in this to make a profit. The government, it may well make a profit, but the government is in this to stabilize the financial system. So I don't think it should demand the most draconian of terms from the banks. We have a systemic problem that we're trying to solve. And so I think that, you don't want to sort of treat the taxpayer as an investor in this one. We want to get the financial system functioning again.
You want to respond?
Well, I think the first priority has to be to get the financial system functioning. But again, I think it is important that we do have harsh conditions because, again, these banks are in trouble. In many cases, they would be out of business. These people would be out of jobs without the government support. So I don't see any problem with imposing harsh conditions, saying, if you take our money, then you're going to have to really give up something. In England, they required that they stop paying dividends to shareholders. I think that would have been a reasonable condition here.
Robert Glover, I want to ask you about another piece of this announced today, which was the government guarantee of new debt taken on by banks. Explain why that part is important. What does it do?
Well, what it does is it makes it easy for banks to borrow from each other because they're now borrowing using the government's balance sheet as a backstop. The danger with it is that it allows weak banks to borrow as easily as strong banks because they all have the government backstop. And when that happens, weak banks could decide or try to borrow a large amount of money, make risky investments to try and make some money to get whole. That's what happened back with the S&L. And the only way to prevent that is to have strong regulation. That's going to be the job of the FDIC, to make sure that weak banks don't try and grow themselves out of their hole.
Well, staying with you, Mr. Glauber, it goes to a question I keep wondering is, how much do we know, even at this point, about the depth of the problem for so many banks?
Well, we don't. What we do know is that banks were frightened to lend to each other, and so they perceived problems with each other, but we don't know the details. The regulators presumably do. And that's going to be the job of the frontline regulators, the controller of the currency, the FDIC, to make certain that these banks, which are newly empowered by having borrowing ability because the government's behind them, don't misuse that borrowing ability and take risks that could get them into more trouble.
Dean Baker, how do we know when anything is working? I mean, what do we watch for at this point?
Well, we watch for the interest rates, for interbank lending rates, a number of other short-term rates that tell us about the immediate credit conditions in the market. And those have come down a little bit. So, at least the early signs are positive. But, we're still very, very far from having the credit markets working as they would ordinarily. So we have a long way yet to go. As I say, the first signs are positive, but, it's far too early to say we're out of the woods just yet.
Richard Silla, what do you think we watch for next in terms of the relative strength or weaknesses of many of these institutions?
Well, I think that I agree with Dean that the interest rate actions today seem to show that we might be moving toward a solution here. And I think many of these things we've been hearing about on TV, all these programs, we've talked about them and they've been announced, but they haven't really taken effect yet. I think in the next 2 or 3 weeks, these programs are going to spring into action. And if we continue to see the markets improve, interest rates come down, then I think we might well say this is the beginning of the end of the crisis. It may be over by the end of the year or early next year. And then, of course, we'll have to worry about the economic fallout. It looks like we're moving into a recession that will be a little more serious than previous recessions.
And I want to ask you before we go, you know, every night here we talk a little bit about the philosophical shifts underway, the relationship of government and markets and sort of unprecedented or new moves every day. How do you see today? Clearly a new philosophical shift in terms of the government's role in banks, I guess.
I think so. In the middle of a financial crisis, ideology is sort of pushed to the side. You know, the government can do no wrong or the government can do no right. We forget about that and we say we have an immediate problem and we have to solve it. And so I think that we're going to move maybe toward the center. It's not going to be deregulate, let the market work, and it's not going to be let the government take over the economy. We're Americans, we're pragmatic, we're in the middle, and we're going to work our way out of this problem.
All right, that's a hopeful way to end tonight. Richard Silla, Robert Glauber, and Dean Baker, thanks very much.
Now the presidential candidates and their plans to revive the faltering economy. NewsHour correspondent Kwame Holman reports.
Republican presidential nominee John McCain today laid out a $52.5 billion economic recovery plan.
What we need to see now is swift and bold action to lead this country in a new direction.
At a rally in Blue Bell, Pennsylvania, McCain endorsed the Bush administration's plan for injecting capital directly into banks with some caveats.
We will require that those companies be reformed and restructured until they are sound assets again and can be sold at no loss or perhaps even a profit to the taxpayers of America. And when that's accomplished, in each instant, government will relinquish its interest in these private companies. We're going to get government out of the business of bailouts and equity stakes and back in the business of responsible regulation.
McCain said he would go further to shore up confidence in the banking system, that as president, his Treasury Department would guarantee all savings for 6 months. Recent polls showed Democrat Barack Obama leading McCain on the question of who would do a better job handling the economy. Today, McCain put before voters several new proposals. McCain would eliminate taxes on unemployment benefits, reduce the capital gains tax by half to 7.5% for 2 years, and accelerate the tax write-off for those forced to sell stocks at a loss. The current deduction is $3,000 per year. McCain would increase it to $15,000. McCain would help seniors whose investment accounts and 401k plans have been decimated by the recent plunge in the markets. McCain called for suspending the requirement that seniors begin withdrawing a minimum amount of their funds at age 70 and a half.
Those rules should be suspended to spare senior citizens from being forced to sell their stock just as the market is hurting the most. Under the emergency measure I propose, we will also cut the tax rate for withdrawals from tax-preferred requirement accounts to 10%. Retirees have suffered enough and need relief.
In addition to laying out his own plan, McCain attacked a key element in Obama's economic platform. Yesterday, Obama said the government should allow tax-free emergency withdrawals from 401k plans for up to 2 years.
This is an invitation to capital flight and therefore to continued instability in the market at a moment when exactly the opposite is needed. Any family that takes part in this will not see the benefits of the market recovery that smart policy can help bring about.
Obama laid out his economic program Monday in Toledo, Ohio. He said it would provide $60 billion of new tax credits and stimulus measures to help middle-class Americans deal with the sluggish economy.
We need to pass an economic rescue plan for the middle class, and we need to do it not 5 years from now, not next year. We need to do it right now.
Obama's plan focused heavily on trying to spur job growth. He would offer businesses a $3,000 tax credit for each new employee hired, eliminate capital gains taxes for small businesses, extend unemployment benefits, and suspend taxes on those benefits. Obama also called for a $25 billion investment in infrastructure projects.
We'll also save 1 million jobs by creating a jobs and growth fund that can provide money to state and local communities so that they can move forward with projects to rebuild and repair our infrastructure. A lot of these projects and these jobs are at risk right now because of budget shortfalls. But this fund will make sure they continue.
And Obama wants to help states and municipalities by creating a federal entity that would loan money to city and state governments. Finally, he called for a 90-day moratorium on home foreclosures for people who are trying hard to make their mortgage payments.
We need to give people the breathing room to get back on their feet.
Like McCain, today Obama also endorsed the government's plan to buy equity stakes in troubled banks. But Obama, too, had concerns.
I am concerned that in the way that they structure this new mechanism, that we are cracking down on excessive CEO pay. That, I think, should be part of the deal. And I'm also concerned that taxpayers' shares that they're purchasing or they're receiving as a consequence of this injection of equity is a good deal for taxpayers.
Obama also was leery of McCain's new economic proposals, particularly the plan to cut the capital gains tax.
I will tell you that nobody really has capital gains right now. So if the idea is to cut capital gains taxes when I don't know anybody, even the smartest investors who right now are going to be experiencing a lot of capital gains, that probably is not going to be particularly useful in solving the financial crisis.
Obama and McCain outlined their plans ahead of tomorrow's final presidential debate in Hempstead, New York. Moderated by Bob Schieffer of CBS, it will focus on domestic issues.
Presidential candidate Ralph Nader joins us now. He's making the race for the third time. He's on the ballot in 45 states this year. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Ray.
Well, we've just come through these remarkable weeks where the Treasury, the Fed, and Congress have been working to cobble together a plan. The presidential candidates, the Republican and Democrat in the race, say they reluctantly went along with these bailout packages because of the urgency of the situation. What did you make of the bailout plans?
No, the right word is cobble. I mean, it's the wrong kind of plan, and they have to readjust now with injections into the banks. But what they should have done, because Washington had Wall Street over the barrel, Wall Street wanted $700 billion bailout, and what Congress should have done is add to Bush's blank check with comprehensive regulation to prevent this, criminal prosecution resources for the culprits on Wall Street, more power to the shareholders to control their company and restrain their bosses' excesses, real taxpayer equity with good conditions, and finally, making them pay for it. If you make the speculators pay for their own bailout, then there's a relief throughout America that there's some fairness coming out of Washington. Now, 0.1% tax on security derivative transactions in 1 year is going to be $500 trillion of transactions in 1 year is $500 billion. So that alone would make a sense of equity, and you wouldn't put it on the backs of the taxpayer. England has that kind of tax, by the way, for years. FDR had it. We helped finance the Civil War with it. But after World War II, it was scrapped. So people go into a store in all your areas where your shows, and they buy necessities of life, and they pay 6-7% sales tax. Tomorrow, someone in Wall Street can buy $1 billion of Exxon derivatives, pay no sales tax. That's where the fairness has to go. What all these commentators don't talk about is where this money is coming from. More deficits, which apparently don't bother the two major candidates enough to have a corrective program. Are we going to sell bonds to the Chinese and to the Western Europeans, Treasury bonds? Are we going to print money? The deficit, as you said earlier in the program, is going to staggeringly expand in the next year. So the best way to deal with it is to cut the bloated military budget, cut the corporate subsidies, put the money into public works, repairing America, good jobs in every community, and make the speculators in Wall Street pay for their bailout. That's what the Nader Gonzalez campaign is taking across the country. And if you want to poll it, Ray, I think it would poll over 80%. Because, you know, not immodestly, for 40 years, we have stood for the people of this country. And these two major candidates in their parties have been battling for a lot of corporate dollars. And more Wall Street money has gone into Obama's campaign than McCain by far. And that's what we got to do with Washington. We got to change it into a body of government that respects the taxpayer, respects the worker, and doesn't just use the word middle class, as Obama always does, without talking about the 100 million poor people in this country who are underpaid, overcharged, ripped off, marginalized, excluded. They do the dirty work for us. And they're never mentioned in the campaign. It's like the poor is a no-no. And yet the poor Americans are shrinking the middle class because a lot of middle classes are going into poverty.
Well, to what extent was the public, the people that you're talking about, at least minority partners in the mess? People pulling money out of the value of their homes to buy things that they wanted to buy, 125% loan-to-value mortgages, refinancing every couple of years. Not everybody, certainly, but a portion of the public had gotten used to this new world that apparently was poisoning the system, we're now told.
That's the lack of consumer standards, where you shouldn't provide a mortgage with no down payment or deferred interest. You know, most poor people, you know, they ask themselves, why should I turn down a bargain, even though it may come to haunt us? That's the key here, that there's a whole brace of regulation to protect consumers, taxpayers, and to reinstate some of FDR's standards to control banks, investment banks, conflicts of interest, and the enormous ricochet effect against prudent institutions who did it right and prudent investors who did it right from the speculation. And what Richard Fisher, the head of the Federal Reserve in Dallas, Texas, called, quote, an orgy of excess and speculative behavior on Wall Street.
Well, none of this is permanently done, so let's fast forward a couple of months. It's late January 2009. Let's say you were elected president. How would you recraft these bills that have built this new architecture for recovery?
Quite simple. You reinstall comprehensive regulation. It was Clinton's deregulation with the Republican support in 1999 and 2000 to open this huge speculative excess, number one. And number two, shareholders are stripped of any authority. It's a violation of capitalist principles for people who own their companies to have no control over their bosses. And the bosses go wild with self-enrichment schemes that the mainstream press has written about constantly. That's second. And then third, this is very, very important, that there's got to be justice. People are crying out against this gross unfairness where these bosses in Wall Street tank their own companies, unemploy hundreds of thousands of workers, and jump ship into a golden lifeboat, and then their companies demand that socialism in Washington, think of the irony, has to bail out corporate capitalism in Wall Street. The only place left for capitalism in this country is small business because they're free to go bankrupt. They don't get bailed out.
Let's keep on 2009 while we're at it. What would you do about Afghanistan? The Republican and Democratic nominee opposing you in this race have come out with different plans. What's yours?
Mine is more soldiers in Afghanistan and the Pakistan border is going to destabilize Pakistan. The National Intelligence Estimate of Mr. Bush just came out with a statement saying there's never been more violence and chaos in Afghanistan since 9/11. So we have to look to wise people like Ashraf Ghani, who was the finance minister for Karzai, the president, and who was a professor here in this country, a native Afghani, who says you've got to connect with the tribal leaders and give them and their people jobs, public works, security, and that will be the buffer against the people who just want chaos. Let's put it this way. Nobody conquers Afghanistan. The British didn't do it. The Soviet Union didn't do it. We're not going to do it. It's a scar on the conscience Obama and McCain, that they are ready to get us into a massive quagmire, and if Pakistan is destabilized, it's going to make Iraq look like small potatoes, even with the million Iraqis and 4,200 soldiers who have died in that conflagration.
And can you extricate the United States from Iraq?
6-month negotiated withdrawal with modest autonomy between Shiites, Sunnites, and Kurds under a unified Iraq of all U.S. soldiers and corporate contractors, continued humanitarian aid, and UN-sponsored elections. That should do it, because that would knock the bottom out of the insurgency. Given the time, I have to ask people to contact our website for more details, votenator.org, where we have this elaborated. We invite volunteers, we invite donations, we take no money from commercial interests. But I know this area. My parents came from Lebanon at age 19. We know the language. We know the authority of the religious leaders, the tribal leaders is still intact. And that's what we have to do to it. Any diminution in violence in recent months in Iraq have been due to realignments between these authority figures. And that's what we have to support. Not more preferring one sectarian group over another, wheeling, dealing, $100 bills, and the intrigue and the revenge killings. And also, there's no way to knock the bottom out of the insurgency, which will ebb and rise according to circumstances, than to eliminate the occupation of their country and give Iraq back to the Iraqis and their oil back. And it would help if the U.S. government would support the peace movements in Israel and Palestine, which have worked out a two-state solution, which was somehow, they're prohibited from appearing in Congress. They're off limits to the two-party campaigns, Obama and McCain. It's disgracefully cowardly for these two people who are smart. I know them. They know what it takes to make peace between the Israelis and Palestine people. A majority of Jewish Americans, Arab Americans, want a two-state solution. So do the majority of the Israelis and the Palestinians. And instead, both major candidates support the hardliners. You don't make peace by supporting the militaristic repression, occupation, colonization of Palestine.
Independent presidential candidate Ralph Nader, good to talk to you, sir.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on the Jim Laird Show.
Finally tonight, our big picture focus on the political battleground state of New Mexico. With 3 weeks to go until Election Day, the NewsHour's economics correspondent Paul Salmon reports on economic inequality in northern New Mexico.
In the land of enchantment, a case study in economic inequality. First, 1.5 miles high on a New Mexico mesa, Los Alamos, home to the national lab that built the A-bomb, to the Hilltoppers football team. A town as plain looking as it is wealthy. Really wealthy.
It's amazing that this is the richest community in America. You never know. That's one of the things about Los Alamos is kind of how understated the wealth is.
Meanwhile, down in the valley of neighboring Rio Arriba County, the struggling citizens of Española and Chimayo.
It's rough, very hard. I only get $29 in food stamps now. I have no transportation.
To Barack Obama, speaking in Española, the inequality illustrates what the financial crisis is proving.
Let's be clear. What we have seen in the last few days is nothing less than the final verdict on an economic philosophy that has completely failed. It's the philosophy that says we should give more and more to those with the most and hope that prosperity trickles down like rain on top of us.
In Albuquerque, John McCain promised change as well.
The status quo is not on the ballot. We're going to see change in Washington. The question is, will our country be a better place under the leadership of the next president? A more secure, prosperous, just society?
It's been a while since both prosperity and justice characterized our economy, says economist Sam Bowles.
That took place in the United States during the entire 20th century, up until around 1980.
I promise. Then came the lower marginal tax rates of the Reagan years and beyond.
Seize these new opportunities to produce, to save, to invest.
Policies were adopted, and the idea that the way to stimulate the economy was essentially to help the rich get richer, on the grounds that that would stimulate investment, risk-taking, and also the fact that the ladder would get a little steeper and the rungs farther apart. That was going to stimulate people to work hard to move up that ladder.
It stimulated investment and risk-taking, all right, says Bowles, to a fault, while stimulating inequality as well. How pronounced is the hill-valley dichotomy?
Here in Los Alamos, it's enormous.
Journalist Dante Chinny runs the Christian Science Monitor's Patchwork Nation project, which has divvied the U.S. up into 11 demographic groups. Los Alamos is a moneyed burb.
High education, high income, low crime, relatively not a lot of diversity. This is a very specific kind of place in America.
The Valley is no less specific.
It's the kind of place we call service worker center where, I work at the Walmart or you work at the gas station and we're all kind of trading money with each other.
While almost everyone is feeling some pain these days, service worker centers are stunned.
We take monthly data, unemployment, foreclosures, gas prices, and we mash that together with some other stuff, including incomes, average commute, and things like that. And then we map it county by county across the country to see who's getting hurt. And what we have seen repeatedly this year as we've done this is the service worker centers are the ones getting hit the hardest.
Española, population about 10,000, the Valley's main city. Joe Maestas is mayor.
This area here was once the center of northern New Mexico's economy. There was a lot of bustling businesses and mercantiles when the railroad was here. When the railroad left town, our downtown died.
The Superfund site in the middle of town has hardly helped revival efforts, nor has the land owned by Native American tribes, exempt from taxes. Mayor Maestas looks to the city on the hill.
The Los Alamos National Labs, it was built on a mountaintop in a shroud of secrecy, but yet over the last 60-plus years, it's evolved into the biggest employer in northern New Mexico with a budget of over $2 billion. But the region has not realized the economic benefits of the presence of the labs. Los Alamos has, but not the region. So trickle-down hasn't worked here. Trickle-down hasn't worked.
But at the lab that birthed both Fat Man, dropped on Hiroshima, and Little Boy, Nagasaki, Kurt Steinhaus says Los Alamos makes earnest efforts to help its neighbors, especially in education.
We have worked with a group of teachers in northern New Mexico, and if you look at the test scores of their students and compare them to the teachers that haven't gotten the specialized training, there's a dramatic improvement.
Moreover, says Steinhaus,
the laboratory matches for every $1 that's contributed to a nonprofit in northern New Mexico, the laboratory matches another $1 from those employees. And in just the last year, over 100,000 hours of volunteer time has been logged on volunteermatch.com.
So the thing
volunteers like scientist Kathy Wilson, who says she asks herself about the inequality here constantly.
Can I bring in a student who's from Española or who's at the University of New Mexico from Española in the sciences? Can I go out and give a lecture to students to get them excited about science? What can I do that will help bridge the gap, not concentrate on the gap?
But Mayor Maestas is looking for something more tangible.
Areas like Española can benefit from the commercialization of technology that results from the Los Alamos National Labs. We've had many, many initiatives in the past where that has been promised to Española, and it's not happening.
Instead, says Loida Martinez of Chimayo, a native Chicana whose family goes back here 8 generations, promises to her were broken. After working at Los Alamos for 31 years, with a master's in computer science and a minor in math, she filed a discrimination suit on behalf of female and Hispanic employees there.
Not only pay inequality, but also the lack of promotions, job opportunities, job placements, and, we aspire just like anybody else. Oh, inside. There were many times that I'd go to sleep at night, and I would sleep in a fetal position because I ached so bad, because it just hurt me, what they would say and do to me, all because of my advocacy work for better living conditions for our community.
The lab recently settled the case, and everyone we talked to there was concerned for the folks in the valley. But the Great Divide seems as sharp as ever.
Being the wealthiest community in the country, they can send their kids to the wealthiest schools in the country. Well, we can't. Even if there's drug addiction, they can send them to the best rehabilitation center. We have no rehabilitation center here.
What this area has instead is a mobile outreach van to at least try to keep its addicts safe and alive. It's many addicts. This county is the heroin overdose capital of the United States. Social worker Sheila Gaylor.
And this is where we keep the green syringes that we distribute. We have like alcohol pads, we have cookers.
Indeed, she and assistant Randy Charles even dispensed Narcan.
And it is a drug that brings you out of opiate overdose.
In another community where as a young person you grow up and you're exposed to alcohol or you smoke marijuana. And in an unlucky twist of fate here, it's heroin.
As to the need for any of these drugs, well, one argument is that it hurts to be so poor, especially in the shadow of such wealth.
And heroin is a great painkiller.
Inequality would seem to be feeding on itself here. Next door in Española, where the mayor had hoped for high-tech, high-pay spin-offs from Los Alamos, big box stores paying minimum wage are sprouting instead. Down the road, arguably the town's top business, an Indian casino, surrounded by loan brokers, a pawn shop.
They prey upon people that need some money, some quick money to gamble in that constant quest for hitting the big jackpot. And the harsh reality is, as the economic times become worse and worse, people continue.
For those on top of the hill, though, it was great while it lasted.
Well, New Mexico has had the highest percentage of growth in venture capital coming into startup companies of any state in the nation over the last 10 years.
Sherman McCorkle finds venture capital to commercialize research like that done at the national labs.
If I look at the last 15 years, it's been about 100 new companies started, somewhere in the area of 4,000 core jobs, 12,000 total jobs, and private sector investment of $1 billion.
If the trickle-down didn't trickle very far, it's not for lack of policy or compassion, says McCorkle. It's just how market economies work nowadays.
The function of the market is rewarding people who add great value to a process. And fortunately or unfortunately, in today's world, that parallels one's education.
Dante Chinny concurs.
The people here have what they like to call transportable skills. Very well educated. If they don't get enough money to work here in Los Alamos, they can simply take what they have and go apply it someplace else in the new economy.
Well, maybe not like they used to, given the current crisis, but they sure have better prospects than those below them, says Sam Bowles.
America is distinct in the extent to which inequality is inherited from generation to generation. The kids of rich parents have a strong tendency to be rich, and the kids of poor parents are very, very likely to be poor to a far greater extent than is true of any other country except for England. That's a huge discrepancy from what we think of as the land of opportunity.
All right. Good luck.
Thank you.
And a huge potential problem in a land now in economic crisis. There's more on New Mexico at our website. Watch a report on the Native American vote and learn more about other battleground states. Go to pbs.org and scroll down to NewsHour Reports. Again, the major developments of this day. The government announced it will buy stakes in 9 major banks in a new move to ease the credit crunch. And the U.S. budget deficit topped $450 billion in the fiscal year that just ended, a new record. Tonight on PBS's Frontline, The Choice, political biographies of Barack Obama and John McCain, airing at 9 p.m. on most PBS stations. Check your local listings. We'll see you online and again here tomorrow evening. I'm Ray Suarez. Thanks for joining us. Good night.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer is provided by...
The world is changing, and how we use energy today cannot be how we use it tomorrow. There is no one solution. It's not simply more oil, more renewables, or being more efficient. It's all of it. Our way of life depends on developing all forms of energy and to use less of it. It's time to put our differences aside. Will you be part of the solution? Chevron, Human Energy.
What has made Grant Thornton a truly global accounting organization with access to resources in more than 100 countries? Is it their global capabilities, or is it their passion for how they serve their clients? Grant Thornton.
Pacific Life. Vestas. The Atlantic Philanthropies. And with the ongoing support of these institutions,
all connected. Clean energy, health care for every family, rebuilding America and our economy, putting our financial house in order. Earl Blumenauer has led the way in making these connections for Oregon and America. And what once might have seemed ahead of its time is exactly what we need today. The time for change is now. Leadership for our future, right from the start.
I'm Earl Blumenauer, and I approve this message.
Do you have ADHD? Are you restless, easily distracted, hyper, disorganized? Do you have trouble concentrating and lose things? You may qualify for an investigational medication research study for ADHD. Call Summit Research Network at 503-228-CARE.
Gordon Smith and George Bush. Billions and billions in tax breaks for big oil and corporations that ship jobs overseas. And now, a blank check for Wall Street. But for working families, there's Jeff Merkley. Balanced the state budget, created the Rainy Day Fund, and Merkley's plan to cut taxes for the middle class and create living wage jobs is what we need to strengthen our economy. Finally, a senator on your side.
I'm Jeff Merkley, and I approve this message.
Spring Awakening at Keller Auditorium, October 21st through 26th.